What if status as a whole was removed from Gen 1 OU? This includes paralysis, sweep, freeze, burn, and poison in any way, shape, or form. No body slam, no rest, not even toxic. Remove all of it. What type of a format do you get? Which Pokemon thrive? Which Pokemon still survive? And which completely fall off the face of the earth? Well, I'm telling you right now, this has been a very interesting idea to explore. Because earlier today, some people on my Discord server just brought this up. And the idea has been thrown around in the past as well. Since obviously in Gen 1, sometimes there's some major RNG that gets people to just hate the game, Freeze being the main one. So we decided to host a bit of a mini season where people can just kind of play Gen 1, but with all of the statuses removed. Technically, Confusion isn't like considered a real status, but we're banning that too. But you can still use partial trapping moves. It's been pretty interesting so far. And the name we've given this format is Kanto Minus. It's pretty cool. And what you're seeing in front of you are the main 6 Pokemon that have been, people have been using. I'll go over them in a little bit. But it's just worth the note that, a lot of Pokemon do a bit better than you would expect. While others it's just, oh my gosh, it is so bad for some of them. Because, keep in mind, since we're banning anything that even has, a status affliction, that means every single electric type move, all of the fire moves besides Fire Spin, and all of the ice moves besides Aurora Beam and Mist are completely gone. So, fire, water, and electric types are absolutely decimated. And that's exactly why on the screen you're seeing Executor. A Pokemon that some would assume would do pretty bad because you're losing Sweet Powder, you're losing Stun Spore. But then you realize Double Edge, Explosion, Psychic, and Mega Drain are all really good moves. And now there's no Fire Blast or Blizzards to worry about. You don't have to worry about anything paralyzing you. All of a sudden, Executor becomes a lot scarier. Which is good because Starmie is doing pretty well as you would expect. No more Thunderbolts, no more Thunder Waves. This thing is super fast and there's not a lot of things that can catch it. Although, that isn't completely true because even though there's no longer Thunder Wave, speed moves in general are way more popular now. So for example, Zapdos, it might not have Thunderbolt or Thunder Wave, but agility is still really good. And Flying Stab is now just kind of mandatory, since Flying's kind of the only type left that can still hit Executor for super effective damage. So that's pretty good. And there's just a lot of other interesting things. I guess I'll start off by saying that despite it looking very different, Tauros is still definitively the #1 Pokemon in the format. There's not much that can really contest it once it's out on the board. It doesn't have Body Slam anymore, but in replace of that, you're using Double Edge. In Double Edge, it's just a 100 base power move. It's just a normal Earthquake, basically. So Tauros, ironically, is hitting even harder than it normally would. Earthquake is still pretty good coverage, and while it's not perfect, because it doesn't really do that much to write on, it's still better than nothing. Hyper Beam is self-explanatory, and the last move you're using is mostly Tail Whip. Because that defense drop it just kind of helps you with a lot of damage ranges. And there's also just not anything better. There's Stomp for flinching, but there's just a lot of things in the format that can kind of deal with that easily, such as Rhydon there. So I don't think it's worth it. Mimic, I think, could be interesting. But unlike other Pokemon like Zapdos, which I'll go over in a little bit, I just don't think it's worth it because because nothing is really staying in on Tauros unless it has no other choice, or if it thinks it can take it on. So, the most common switch-ins for Rhydon, or I mean, will be Rhydon, but if not Rhydon, then probably like Aerodactyl or stuff like that. And there's not much Tauros really wants from, just Mimic. That's why Tail Whip is better. Also because there's just Reflect being used, so just another reason. So that's, overall Tauros is doing fine. Now, the next Pokemon is very contested. I've seen people say, like, Starmie, and I can definitely lean towards that. But I don't think anyone can deny that Exeggutor has absolutely just taken over everything, and it's kind of a mainstay, mostly for Starmie, because if you don't have Exeggutor on your team, there is nothing really that can stay in against Starmie here. So that's a reason. But also, Rhydon is just so much better because not only does it really enjoy no more ice moves, although water for the most part is completely taken ice's place, but there's just more normal moves being used. And a lot of the Pokemon that are using normal moves, such as Tauros, just now don't have the options anymore to effectively deal with Rhydon. There's no more Blizzard. But you know what can? Exeggutor. Alakazam is also doing really good, because it's one of the fastest things in the format. There's no longer any paralysis to keep it down. So for the most part, it's just kind of the best lead in the game by far. A lot of people try to go for Starmie, myself included, because I thought that, like, at the very least, you could try to go for Bubble Beam to lower Zam's speed. And this is absolutely the case once you get later on in the match, but not so much as the lead, because you're just getting a free switch into Exeggutor, so you don't really want to risk that. But outside of that, Psychic is good, Seismic Toss is good, you're really good at just, damaging things and forcing them to waste a lot of their power points. So nothing too interesting, but it is pretty nice that Zam can kind of do really well. And Zapdos is my favorite Pokemon to use, and that's because of probably one of my favorite reasons for this metagame. And that's the fact that Mimic is a usable move. Now, why is that? Well, that is mostly because, like, with the options limited, and with what we do have, with things like Starmie, Zam, and Chansey still being pretty good, Mimic just allows you to get a lot of the moves that can help Zapdos just kind of beat basically everything. It's a little RNG reliant, since you don't guarantee what move it is, but still, basically anything Zapdos gets could be useful. For example, both Recover and Seismic Toss could be huge for Zapdos, because with Agility, you're faster than Zam and Starmie, and neither one of them have ice moves to really threaten you. Nor are they using Thunder Wave or anything like that. Seismic Toss gives you more options to just, like, a PP stall them, but if you get Soft Boiled or Recover, that significantly helps Zapdos' survivability. But along with that, you could also use Mimic and potentially get Earthquake. If you get Earthquake from Rhydon with Reflect, you could actually beat it 1v1. You don't want to have to do that, but still, it's a really good option. So overall, like, that's just the beginning, but there's plenty of other winners and losers for this format. Starting off with some of the winners, let's look at Dodrio for a second. Because Dodrio and Persian are definitely OU for this format. Like I said, Flying Stab is just really good for Exeggutor. So Drill Peck, it's just good, man. Like, there's not much to say. Agility also allows you to outspeed Zam and Starmie, and you can threaten to kill them with either Double Edge or Hyper Beam. It gets super walled by Rhydon, but overall very usable. Hits pretty hard, and luckily with Exeggutor in the format, you always do have a switch in for Rhydon. You also have Starmie as well, and Starmie is always using Surf, and it's probably using Bubble Beam as well. Mostly that it can outspeed Zam after 33% chance of lower speed. But some other moves that Starmie likes to use would be Reflect, as well as Mimic. Mimic, you could potentially get Seismic Toss to, like PP Stalk and Zam. Or you can get a second copy of Psychic or Recover Soft Boiled to just tremendously, keep your like recovery and livability. I didn't put it in the list of winners though, because for Starmie, it's not so much it really winning or gaining stuff. It's just more so everything else kind of losing way more, if you get what I mean. But while Dodrio is pretty good, and I do think it's enough to say an OU, solely because flying types are just really good this format, debatably the best type in the game, because along with, being strong against Executor, you're also just, that Earthquake immunity is just really good. But Persian is pretty good as well. I don't think anyone's going to be too surprised to hear that. Persian was always the best non-OU Pokemon you could be using, but everything it does just kind of works even better here. No paralysis, so it's just one of the fastest things in the format and really hard to deal with. Slash being an auto crit is great. Doesn't hit as hard as you would like it to. Like it doesn't even 2-hit KO Starmie, but still. Really good trait to have. And if you don't have to use tutorials, you shouldn't. And Gengar is still good. Like I'd say Gengar's probably a B tier Pokemon. But no status really hurts. More Earthquakes being used really hurts. But most importantly, Zam and Starmie being everywhere with Psychic is just really, really dangerous. But that means that the main count of the Persian is just not as active. And with more Rhydons being there, it makes Bubble Beam even better. So overall, Persian has it pretty good. And as a bonus, it could potentially use Mimic to try to get a Soft Boiled or anything really. Like, Persian I don't think is going to complain with any move it gets. Rock Slide and Earthquake can also have their uses. So overall, just good for Persian. Already went over these three here, so like, not much else I need to say. Tauros just it kind of just keeps doing what it's doing. It isn't losing as much as Chansey and Snorlax are, which is weird because those two aren't really losing like anything detrimental either. And when I say detrimental, that's up to interpretation, because both are definitely OU. They are definitely A tier at the worst, but if some people had arguments for S tier, I would not be surprised. But it's weird, because like, they just aren't needed for every single game anymore. There's probably more arguments for Snorlax to be used, but I'll go over them later. Executor, you probably get the idea already about why it's so good. And Zam just really enjoys just having nothing else that really wants to compete with it as a lead. It just no paralysis, just holy crap, like no paralysis. Zam just loves so much. Also for that first set, there was Reflect. I don't really like Reflect on Zam that much. I feel like you're just never really having to deal with physical attackers. Because with no paralysis, you're not really ever going to send Tauros out against Zam. So I think Mimic to potentially get another set of Psychic, Seismic Toss, or Healing move. I think that's just better. Now these are the winners, but we definitely have some losers. And I'm just going to use these three to represent that. Electric types, Ice types, and Fire types. And you can just look at all these movesets and just already get the picture. Like, look at Jolteon here. Like, it's just abysmal. And Jinx has Psychic, but then pretty much everything else is complete garbage. Especially in the format where normal is even stronger than it usually is. Flareon is probably the best one off here because Fire Spin is a pretty unique option, but even then, it's just not doing anything. It's kind of a shame, but at the same time, I feel like this is by far the biggest change. Not so much the removal of status itself, but just the removal of 3 of the most common special attacking types. It really does end up being a big deal. And then you got Pokemon that, like, it's not like... A lot of them are just not really using very different sets, which is kind of funny. And others can just kind of keep doing what they were usually doing, just without status. So Aerodactyl here is a Pokemon that does pretty good. Like, honestly, way better here than it does in, like, regular OU. In fact, I don't think it's OU. Definitely not. I don't even think it's B tier. But I do think Aerodactyl is a pretty solid C tier Pokemon. Because as you saw with that Tauros set, it just can't hurt Aerodactyl whatsoever. A normal resistance and a ground immunity is crazy good. Also, as a bonus, since there's no status, both Dig and Fly are legal in Gen 1, because you no longer have to worry about being paralyzed while you're in the invulnerable state. So Aerodactyl actually gets stabbed for once. Although, if you don't want Fly, you can always go for Mimic, being able to copy a recovery move, or to go for Seismic Toss. Those are just good options all around. So overall, Aero's doing pretty good. Admittedly, not having rest is really annoying, because you can't perfectly wall something. Like, you can't just wall something here like you could for, like, Mew in Gen 1 Ubers. But still, Aero has a pretty good thing going here, and I don't think anyone wants to complain. Aerodactyl's really cool. And so is Snorlax. When you look at this set here, it looks basically identical to its Uber set, except you're using Double Edge instead of Body Slam. So I'm not sure what it is, but Snorlax just isn't mandatory, despite it having, on paper, everything it already had. I think a big part is that without rest, you really just don't have the longevity you used to. Amnesia takes a big hit, although not completely dead. But Reflectalax just, yeah, without rest, you're just really lacking. That's why offensive sets are by far the best. But even then, the metagame is kind of faster in general. And with no recovery, things like Starmie and Zam can really mess you up. It doesn't help that with, Starmie and such, they have Recover, and unlike an RBY, you don't have Body Slam to threaten paralysis with. But even then, I can definitely see Snorlax rising to S tier, and potentially making it close to, like, the top 5. I don't know if it will, but Snorlax is just a great Pokemon, and I don't think it's going to be going to, like, the mid tiers anytime soon. And funny enough, Amnesialax isn't completely dead. Some would assume it might be, since you won't have Blizzard or Ice Beam or Thunderbolt anymore. But you still have both Surf and Psychic, and both of these are literally some of the best moves you can have. Water attacks for Rhydon is just great, and then Psychic for those special drops against Starmie, Alakazam, just overall really good. I forgot to put it, but there's also Chansey. Chansey it's basically doing what it wants to do in regular RBY when it comes to, walling special attackers, and it still has Seismic Toss. Salt Bullet is still good, and since you're not using Thunder Wave, things like Reflect and Counter are still as good as ever. In fact, debatably even better. But you can also try going for Psychic instead, for just another attacking move and for special drops. It's still good at long special attackers. However, losing Thunder Wave is a huge double-edged sword. It makes Chansey way more passive in this metagame than it normally would be for other metagames. It's just that without paralysis, Chansey isn't putting that much pressure on Starmie and Alakazam anymore. They are free to outlast you with Recover, because Recover has double the power point of Soft Boiled. They can go for Psychic and eventually get that special drop, and there's not much chance you can do. At the same time, it is by far the easiest switch in to those Pokemon in the first place. So Chansey is not doing the worst. It's probably still A tier, but I also wouldn't be surprised if it did fall to B tier. But I do not think that's going to happen. I think it's definitely going to be good enough to where it's still going to stay in high usage. But we'll have to wait and see. Now, despite Snorlax having a usable Amnesia set, it's also kind of pointless because Swelbro is using the exact same moves, but it has Stab, and a Psychic Resistance, and a Water Resistance. Both of those are great in this metagame. Although, I think Swelbro definitely hates the removal of Rest way more than Thunder Wave. You can probably use a different move than Mimic. Like, you have Reflect, I guess. So yeah, Mimic's probably the best move. So you can hopefully maybe get a recovery move. But overall, I don't think Swelbro's that bad. In fact, I think it's actually kind of a good anti-lead. Because against Zam, you can just go for one Amnesia, threaten pretty good damage with Surf, and then potentially switch something in, or they have to switch out. And with no electric moves, the only thing that really hurts Swelbro is grass types with Razor Leaf. And even then, you have Psychic. So, like, you go for one Amnesia, and the Victory Bell can't really safely switch in. And it can't just fight a full HP Swelbro, since if you switched out, they probably went for Amnesia. I've seen some people underestimate Swelbro and put it kind of low in their tier list, but I don't get that at all. I think Swelbro is gonna be fine. Now, maybe Dewgong isn't the best Pokemon to put here. I should probably put Cloyster instead, since for all intents and purposes, Cloyster is by far the best Ice type in Gen 1. And that's because Aurora Beam is the only real Ice move left. 65 base power is not that very good, but you do not have the freeze chance, so you can actually use it. It's one of the few things that can hit Executor super effectively. That's pretty good. And funny enough, both Articuno and Lapras don't have Aurora Beam, so Dewgong has a legitimate niche here that it wouldn't normally have in other metagames. I think that's very funny. But yeah, it's definitely Cloyster that should be here instead. Although I do think it will be worth testing out Dewgong, but I couldn't tell you how good it is. The last Pokemon to go over here is Victory Bell. It loses Sweet Powder, which was normally its best trait in regular RBY. But your second best trait, Wrap, that's still here. And you can still go for Sword Stance, Hyper Beam, and Razor Leaf is really good for Rhydon, Swelbro, and other water types. So Victory Bell is doing pretty good. That water resistance is also just more prevalent here. But at the same time, there's also more Psychics and Drill Picks being used. So a bit of a double-edged sword. It doesn't, like, super thrive, but it's doing alright for itself. I made a quick tier list. Some things are bound to change. S tier is the Pokemon that I think are top tier and are just going to stay there. A tier Pokemon that are definitively an OU. Really great. They might have some problems, but overall, it's mostly fine. Although I do think Dodrio is the one here that could potentially fall to B tier. Like, if you put Dodrio in B tier, I would not blame you. Because I feel like, unlike Persian, while it's better offensively, I could see just being completely walled by Rhydon as a bad thing. But then again, Zapdos was also... I just realized Zapdos is even here on the tier list. Here he is, yeah. Like, Zapdos is basically the exact same thing in regular RBY. We don't put Zapdos in B tier because it's walled by Rhydon. So yeah. Now, B tier is mostly Pokemon I think are just solidly in OU, except for Golem. Golem could be put in C tier, because I'm not sure if Golem is enough for OU. But at the same time, like, if it's not good enough for OU, I do think Golem is leagues better than everything in C tier. So it's kind of like this doing its own thing, really. C tier is Pokemon that I think have a lot of potential, but I'm not sure if they have what it takes to be staying in OU. But even if they don't, they definitely have a lot of just good uses. I already talked about Aerodactyl, but some other examples could be Kabutops. Water Stab, really good. Rock typing for normal moves, also really good. It just has a lot of things going in its favor. And with West Recovery in general, Sword Stance is kind of really dangerous. Same thing with Pinsir. That earthquake immunity, or not immunity, resistance. That resistance is even more valuable now than it has been before. And you could just kind of threaten to kill a lot of things with Sword Stance. Gyarados might be the worst one here, but like, having Water Stab, that's good. Earthquake immunity, good. Grass neutrality is actually interesting and helps it stand apart from the other water types. But I'm not sure if that's enough. Sandslash already being the best Sword Stance user is just even better now. Although not having electric moves does make it harder to pivot in. Dragonite does not have to worry about Blizzard anymore, which is great. But it also doesn't have any good coverage except for Bubble Beam. Though granted, Bubble Beam is good against Rhydon. It also does kind of leaves Dragonite just not really doing anything. I've had to face it a few times, and each time I faced it, they just went for agility, went for Wrap, but they just had to switch in because they couldn't realistically beat anything that was in front of it. Venusaur is just kind of a bulkier, faster Victory Bell, but I still think Victory Bell is better because it has Wrap. Poliwrath is kind of cool, because Finding Stab could potentially be better here than it normally is, but even if it isn't, Amnesia with Water Stab is just overall pretty good. Eradicate's also pretty self-explanatory. Super Fang, but Super Fang is a little bit better in this format since there's not as much recovery going around, and also not as much Gengar. D-tier is Pokemon that could have some good traits. You can maybe work in OU, but I am not sure. If I had to guess, I'd say Amistar, Vaporeon, and Lapras probably have the best shot. Also, maybe Growth, Tangrowth, but I don't know. And then E tier is just things that are just really bad, and I wouldn't really consider using at all. Now, I do have some replays. These are just full-on matches, though, so like, I'll just play it so you have a decent idea about what it's like. Like, I won't show the full thing, at least for this one here with Minori, because it lasted pretty long. So while this is going on, I'll just talk about some of my thoughts and hopes for this metagame. Because I am hosting a tournament for this. And you will be seeing the tournament. Like, it's going to be on my Discord server. So the bracket is open right now. So in the link in the description of this video, you will see a link to my Discord server. If you go there, you will, like, you can join if you want. The bracket closes on Friday, and then the tournament officially begins on Saturday. And a lot of the things I talked about here, like, keep in mind, could very well change. It is really just the first day of us testing out this format. And things are always, willing to change, but I feel like even just today, we've already found a lot of really good discoveries, such as, like, Bubble Beam, Starmie. I don't think anyone had that on the radar, but it's funny, like, that's for sure. And I think some things could rise and fall. Like, as you can see in this replay, Midori is using Kadabra, which Kadabra has already kind of been used sometimes in RBY, but it's probably even more so just better here, since Zam is a lot better here, so having 2 copies of Zam, obviously that's kind of nice. Although I do think it kind of struggles, because, like, as you see there, Double-Edge Executor kind of just 2-hit KOs it. So I don't really know. But I'm excited. I really am excited, because for me personally, I've always been more of a hyper offense player. Which is funny, because everyone else thinks this metagame is going to be like a big stall. Which in some ways it kind of is. Like, I will be honest, most of the replays so far have usually ended up being like 100 turns. But I honestly feel like a part of that is just people not knowing exactly what to do. Because I've had a few games where I just ended on, like, in just 40-something turns, not even 50. So, like, I know for a fact you could pop off and you can try to kill the opponent rather quickly. So, I don't know. Like, I could be wrong, but I feel like the format isn't really that bad. Now, if you want to watch these replays, they're all posted in the server. So I'm just going to end off by showing this replay I had with Zastui. we had a full-on match. If you want to see how the match ends, you definitely should just watch the replays yourself by joining the Discord. Well, here we go. It started off pretty normal. Although funny enough, like, I believe this was the replay where Zashri didn't use Rhydon. And this was the replay that made Zashri realize that Rhydon is kind of just completely mandatory. And when Rhydon's mandatory, you better believe that Executor is mandatory. So, starts off pretty well. I lowered the Alakazam speed. And I feel like once you do have that speed drop, even though there's no Thunder Wave, meaning that there's not any, way like Exam can just lose a turn, I still feel like fishing for crits is more than worth it. And they have Cloyster here, and I haven't talked about Cloyster too much, but I still think it definitely still OU. Granted, it's like not having Ice Stab is weird. You have Aurora Beam, but if I'm being honest with you, I'm not even sure if Cloyster's gonna keep Aurora Beam, because I'm pretty sure Executor with Mega Drain still just beats Cloyster straight up, because Cloyster doesn't have the best HP in the world, and Aurora Beam isn't the strongest hitting move in the world. It's... Wait, is it weaker than Ice Punch, or... Oh, it is! Ice Punch is what's it called, 75? Yeah, it's even weaker than Ice Punch. That's kind of pathetic. But either way, though, Executor, I think, just always beats Cloyster 1v1 without Cloyster getting a crit. So I just don't think it's worth it. So, yeah, I think there's just really no ice moves at all in this format. And some things like Rhydon could potentially drop down in viability later. I can't say that for sure, but I feel like people might be able to get used to it. And they might be able to find more answers. You might see just more, or you might. I'm trying to think here. What has been used yet? I haven't used it yet, but I really want to try testing Kabutops as well as not Dugtrio, Kingler. Yeah, Kingler. Although I'm not exactly sure how good Kingler is going to be, because even though Water Stab is better, and even though Sword Stance could be a monster, I also feel like I don't know, like, usually in regular RBY, Kingler definitely needs a lot of the team to be paralyzed. But then again, Rhydon also usually needs that, but Rhydon's so very good. So, we'll have to see. Like, even if you don't want to play the format, I'd love to hear your thoughts, as well as any spicy tech building you might have. If there's anything you think could be cool, please let me know. As well as any Pokemon you think might be under the radar, or any Pokemon that you might think might be overrated, or underrated, just let me know. But that's about it for this. I beat Zashri here, and you know what? Don't join the Discord server. Just assume that Zashri never beat me ever again. Because I am just that cool of a dude. I definitely didn't get 6-0 by Shelly yesterday for the latest Generation Jumble tournament. That's about it for this video. It was a bit more different than the regular What If videos, but it's also just a format that I'm just really interested in. If you'd like me to make more videos on Kanto Minus, since I will be hosting a tournament on it, let me know in the comments below. But until next time, this is Groundback, and I look forward to hearing from you.